Alexa and I chose the topic Nelson Mandela's encounter with apartheid. Since neither of us knew much about him, we decided to do our research on the apartheid system. Nelson Mandela's encounter with apartheid and exchanges with the ruling class provided that institutional racism is inherently flawed, an argument we would agree with today.
Racism is prejudice or discrimination directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Institutional racism is a form of racism which is structured into political and social institutions. It occurs when institutions, including corporations, governments, and universities, discriminate either deliberately or indirectly against certain groups of people to limit their rights.
The word apartheid means the state of being apart. Apartheid was a system of racial segregation in South Africa enforced through legislation by the National Party, the governing party from 1948 to 1994. Slavery in South Africa had officially ended in 1833 under the Slavery Abolition Act. This gave all slaves in the British Empire their freedom. Under the apartheid system, the rights of being treated fairly for the majority of blacks and other ethnic groups were cut off, and whites were given power over blacks. Although within and outside South Africa opposed to the apartheid system, its laws remained in effect for almost 50 years plus. Apartheid official policy was introduced after the general election of 1948. Legislation classified people into four racial groups: Bantu, known as Black Africans, colored of mixed race, and whites. Native Americans were the fourth category and was added at a later time. The apartheid laws included no mixed marriages or mixed sexual relations. Non-white South Africans would be forced to live in separate areas from whites and use separate public places. Black Africans and colored women suffered from both racial and gender discrimination.
Nelson Mandela was born July 18, 1918, in South Africa. Mandela's real name was actually Holy Shiza. It was very coincidental that Holy Shiza meant troublemaker. He got the name Nelson by his first school teacher because she refused to say the name Holy Shiza. When Nelson was very young, he fell off of a donkey into a bush of thorns in front of all of his friends. He was very embarrassed because of it, and as a result, he never forgot and never purposely tried to embarrass anyone, even if he didn't like that person. He attended the Fort Hare University, but was expelled in 1940 for leading a student strike. He obtained his degree from the University of Witwatersrand, where he studied law. He joined the African National Congress in 1944 and became a founding member of its youth group, the African National Congress Youth League. ANC's main goal was to improve conditions and rights for people of color in South Africa. After the government of the National Party established the apartheid system, which would benefit whites only, Nelson Mandela became really involved in the ANC's 1952 anti-apartheid defiance campaign. He also presided over the 1955 Congress of the People. While working as a lawyer in the ANC, Nelson Mandela was continuously arrested but was unsuccessfully prosecuted in the treason trial from 1956 to 1961. On April 8, 1960, the ANC was banned, so Nelson Mandela secretly joined the South Africa Communist Party, where protests were nonviolent. He later goes underground and co-founded the militant Umkhonto we Sizwe in 1961. Nelson Mandela traveled around the country to raise money for ammunition to fight against the apartheid. In 1962, when he returned to the country, he was arrested and convicted of trying to overthrow the state. He was put in jail for 5 years at the Robben Island prison for leaving the country illegally. While Mandela was in jail, he was charged with leading a sabotage campaign against the government. The trial took place in Pretoria. The trial was known as the Rivonia trial. This trial went down in history. It lasted almost 6 months. Mandela gave an important speech in which he said, "I have dedicated myself to this struggle for the African people. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." After the trial, Mandela was sentenced to a lifetime and sent back to the Robben Island prison. He was in prison for 27 years. He was 46 years old when he went to jail. Many people told him he would die in jail. Mandela was treated horribly in jail. He was part of the D class ranking. The D class was the worst treated class of all. His class had the least amount of privileges and had to eat the worst food. All of the prisoners were ordered to call the guards boss, and they were only given short shorts to wear. While in prison, he continued to stand up and fight for human rights and the poor treatment of blacks. His beliefs were widespread, and he was respected by many people. Some events that are happening today have caused people of all races to fight for equal justice as well.
In 1985, President P.W. Botha offered Mandela his freedom if he would give up violence. Mandela refused the offer. He felt as though he could not accept because he was not a free man. Mandela also said he was not responsible for the violence. In 1989, President Botha stepped down as a leader of the National Party. He was replaced by F.W. de Klerk. The new president believed that apartheid was wrong and released some of the African National Congress prisoners. In November 1989, de Klerk came together with his cabinet to discuss legalizing the African National Congress and freeing Mandela. Nelson Mandela was released on February 11, 1990. The event was broadcast live across the world. He gave a speech declaring his commitment to peace with the white minority, but made it clear that the ANC's struggles were not over and he would fight until apartheid ended.
Between 1990 and 1991, Nelson Mandela exchanged his beliefs while on African tours, meeting supporters and politicians. He encouraged foreign countries to support the end of the apartheid government. After spending much time fighting for human rights, he later was elected as the African National Congress president.
It was a slow process, but the apartheid system was finally coming to an end. Over several years, laws were changed and restrictions lifted. In 1994, a law was passed that gave all people the right to vote. On April 27, 1994, the Democratic elections were held in South Africa. The National Congress won 62.65% of the vote, enough votes to demolish the apartheid system.
On May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black Democratic elected president. In 1999, after only one term in office, Nelson Mandela stepped down as president. On June 1, 2004, he announced his retirement from public life. However, he continued to work on behalf of his foundations.
After much research and discussion, Alexa and I agree that the apartheid system and racism is just wrong as it only benefits one class of people. Racism makes people feel angry and disrespected. It makes low morale, loss of wages, production, and results in people living in poverty. Even today, it is a known fact that people in South Africa are still struggling and living in poverty.